You're listening to Answers for the Family with Alan Cardoza, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Greetings to all of you listening around the world, and a warm welcome as we bring you another edition of the Answers for the Family radio show. I'm your host, Alan Cardoza, and if you're a regular listener, thank you for joining us once again. If this is your first time, please make yourself at home as we bring you Answers for the Family. Now, each week, this show will address issues such as locating a runaway teen, family crisis intervention, building self-esteem, dealing with addictions, and so much more. Having over 30 years' experience working with families in crisis, I've been fortunate to meet and work with some of the top professionals in many of the helping fields and skilled authors who are working to make this world a better place for all of us. Now, you can all do me a big favor. Please check out some of our past shows at answersforthefamily.com to hear some informative and entertaining guests, as well as some dynamic co-hosts. Now, I'm also looking for some show ambassadors who will forward at least one of our shows to your social media group and or someone you know who can benefit from a particular subject. I truly appreciate it, and this is just another way that we can make a positive difference in the lives of others. Now, with me today as guest co-host is Garbriella von Frey. She is the founder of the Dare to Be Kind movement. Now, Garbriella has been on the road filming since early November. She is interviewing nonprofit associations and people from all walks of life who have taken up the Dare to Be Kind challenge of one act of kindness in a 2-mile radius to highlight to everyone how kindness begins in your own neighborhood. So my question to her is, where in the world is Garbriella?
Okay, at the moment I am in Iowa State in the US of A. And I am very, very glad I haven't hit the snow yet. But in a few days, I will be headed to the snow.
All right. And so what is next? Where is the next step for you, or the next location?
I was supposed to be already today in Milwaukee, but plans always change because depending on who I meet, I will deviate my route. So I'm actually interviewing truckers because in Iowa, in the Quad Cities, is one of the biggest truck stops in North America. And truckers is a very, very lonely profession. That's one that I wanted to know a little bit more about them because they're a little bit like forgotten people. And the second reason that I would like to interview them is they are our eyes on the road for human trafficking.
Yep.
And that is a very, very big issue in the world, but especially here in America too.
Well, and it's another way to spread kindness. I mean, it makes, yeah, because if we're going to spread kindness, why not start with somebody that travels all over the country spreading that kindness?
Yes, and I feel kind of kinship with these truckers because on the road we say hi to each other. And when I have a stop, my car stands next to these huge trucks and I feel kind of minuscule next to them. And, and then once they come out, they're just jovial, kind people that are looking like me to have a little talk with someone and to feel encouraged.
Mm-hmm. Well, for those of you out there, if you missed last week's show, Garbriella and I focused on kindness and gratitude and how this is a wonderful way for you to start off your new year. So, and I know that we also had some questions that came in. Now, Garbriella, there was one of the questions that we didn't get to because, again, there was so much going on, and I didn't even realize it till afterwards, but one very important question. So let me ask this one of you so that you can provide that answer. And, again, if you missed last week's show, you can go to answersforthefamily.com. You can listen in and you can hear all of the other wonderful answers that she had for some of the many listeners who called in or wrote in. Now, this one reads, I am 14 years old and home for Christmas vacation from the private school that I go to. I don't really want to go back to school because some of the other kids here make fun of me because I don't have the nicest clothes or the newest iPhone, and because my mom works as a housekeeper for one of the other families that go there. They tell me that I'm going to be their housekeeper soon, and I know my parents work hard for me to be able to go to to that school. So I'm afraid to tell my parents that I'm not happy here. What can I say without making it worse? And this is from Maria in San Francisco.
Well, first of all, Maria, thank you so much for your question. And I'm going to keep it short, but we really did want to answer your question. First of all, of course, these words hurt. We understand that. Alan and I went instantly when we read it, oh, that's terrible. So that we understand your sadness about it. But I think communicating is always the key and is always a solution. And if you don't communicate, then this will continue, and it will continue making you feel down and maybe even depressed. So I would say do talk to your parents, and let's see if they have some ideas. But if it was me and just you and me together, I would tell you, own your uniqueness. It doesn't matter what your parents do. Be proud of them, and tell the child who's telling you that you're going to be their housekeeper soon, you will say, I have different aspirations. I have different hopes. But, because I think the moment that child that is teasing you, bullying you about that will know that it doesn't affect you at all, will stop really quickly. Because bullying is only fun if there is momentum. And if you yourself can stop the momentum with a simple word or look, that can be very, very powerful. And you don't have to be mean about it. Just say yes. My mom is a housekeeper, so what? Mm-hmm. She's honest and doing a good job.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Garbriella. I think that's beautiful advice. And again, thank you, Maria, for reaching out. It touches my heart, that you were listening, that you're reaching out. And I think Gabriella's advice is right on target. We also had some other questions last week, and one of which involved depression. And so I thought that really does lead right into today's show because, for years, the first line of defense for depression has been pharmaceuticals. But our guest's new book, it's called Feeling Better, Beat Depression and Improve Your Relationships with Interpersonal Psychology. She's able to talk about this and realize that pharmaceuticals isn't necessarily the answer all the time. So in this book, authors Cindy-Stulberg and Ronald J. Frey, Ph.D., say that it is actually our relationships that offer the most effective path to healing, not those pharmaceuticals. So fortunately, joining us today from Toronto, Canada, is Cindy-Stulberg. She is a psychologist who has counseled individuals, couples, groups, and families for more than 40 years, along with being the co-author of the book, Feeling Better. She is also the co-director of the Institute for Interpersonal Psychology. Cindy, welcome to Answers for the Family.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be with you today, and I appreciate you having me on for your listeners and for yourself.
Well, we appreciate you putting together the book. Fortunately, I was able to, to read it ahead of time, and I think you are touching on such an incredible thing that we have an epidemic now in this country of depression, and I've got a variety of my own opinions as to why it's going there, but I know that, Big Pharma is capitalizing on this incredibly. So, I know in your book, you offer sort of an introduction to interpersonal psychology, and you call it IPT. So share with our listeners what IPT is exactly.
Yes, thank you, and it's nice to be able to do that. IPT, which is really the short form for Interpersonal Psychotherapy, has been around for a long time, but it hasn't been as well publicized or known. It was created by Drs. Klerman and Wiseman, who were a psychiatrist and psychologist, husband and wife, in the 1960s. And it's very similar to what we know as cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's short term. You can work within 8 to 12 weeks. It was initially developed for depression. It's been researched in many, many research studies to be effective. And the premise is that if you have good, meaningful, constructive relationships, you're going to feel better. And that's what we deal with when you're dealing with depression. is that if you have depression and you work on improving your relationships, the secondary effect is going to be that your symptoms of depression diminish and drop down. And then you also, with IPT, you know what you did to help yourself feel better so that you can continue to use those practical, concrete strategies with the next issue that comes up or the next problem that comes up in your relationship. So it's a very, very highly recommended by psychiatry and psychology treatment guidelines. And I think it's a wonder, and that's really what we wanted to do in reading the book, in writing the book, was share IPT with the public, as opposed to their professional books. But I don't think as many people know, about IPT and can go to their doctor and say, I'm dealing with depression, I'm struggling with this, where can I get this therapy? So it was a real opportunity to share that with the public.
So what differentiates IPT from other forms of talk therapy?
Well, I think in some ways it's very current. You basically deal with the here and now. So it's not about talking about what did your mother do, when you were a little kid, but what did your mother do this week that made you stressed out and aggravated and annoyed and made you feel crappy, right? Mm-hmm. It also is, the premise is different in that it focuses primarily on building constructive relationships. It's very structured and collaborative so that there's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And really, in a sense, having that finite number of sessions too, or as you read the book, there are weeks, right? There are 12 weeks in the book. And it gives you a real impetus and a real push to say, I'm either going to change something or I'm not. But I'm not going to sit around and talk about the same issue over and over and over again and not do anything. It really helps people articulate what they're feeling. And one of the other major differences from the most similar to IPT, which is CBT, is there isn't a lot of written homework. You don't have to fill out thought records. We're not talking about people having irrational thoughts or inflexible thinking, which sometimes makes people feel like they're doing something wrong. And that isn't what we want to convey when we're talking about IPT. So that's some of the highlights, some of the major differences between that and some other therapies that people may be aware of.
Thank you, Cindy, for explaining that. And you also encourage readers to think of their depression like a broken leg. Would you mind explaining that a little bit more, not just to the listeners, but for myself too?
Absolutely. And I really loved listening to both of you talk about that young girl who was dealing with the problems as well. And just, I'll tell you about the broken leg, but I was going to add as well, is there anybody else in her school who may be in a similar circumstance, who may be on a bursary or a scholarship? Because once you reach out to other people who are feeling or in the similar situation you're in, it's great to get that kind of help and feel like you're not alone. So that's a huge part of IPT. And I really appreciated what you both had to say to that young woman. I think in terms of talking about depression as a broken leg, I think maybe you would both agree that there's been a lot of stigma around mental health and mental health issues, although we are getting better at having, actors or celebrities or athletes speak out about it. I still think people are reluctant always to talk about it. So what we say is if you look at depression just like an illness or like a broken leg, if you have a cast on your leg, you're not going to be embarrassed and you're not going to not go try to get together with your friends still, although you're hobbling on your crutches, right? But really with depression, and also people don't want to feel depressed. People aren't bringing this on themselves. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're crazy. It's not because they did something bad. They don't deserve it. It has symptoms, just like pneumonia has symptoms. Or, you break your leg, you have a cast, everybody signs it, it says something funny on it, right? Mm-hmm. And you take some time off to help yourself feel better. Maybe you don't go to the dance this weekend, or you don't, do your job that you always do, which is delivering the mail. So if you think of your depression as an illness, and you're able to explain that both to yourself and the other people around you, hopefully they'll become more educated, and then they will also give you the care and concern and the compassion and the support that they would give you if you had a broken leg, or if you had epilepsy, or if you had diabetes, right?
Yep.
It's not that we're not saying you still don't need to try to do things to help yourself feel better, but it is an illness with symptoms. It's treatable, and you can get better. So I'm just wondering if that makes sense to you guys as well.
Absolutely. You're basically, if I'm hearing this correctly, you're basically saying, let's take the stigma away by the broken leg syndrome by saying, hey, I do have something, and saying, hey, don't put me in the box. I'm already telling you what I have, and now let's move on. Right. Kind of like
right, or not to even be judgmental of yourself or anyone else be judgmental of you, right? It's not that you're weak. It's not that you need to be embarrassed. There's nothing to be embarrassed about, right? You're having a problem, and I'm here to help people, and many people are compassionate, Absolutely. Right? And if people are educated and understand that it's an illness, and especially we find that certainly if clients come in and their partners or their teachers or their workplaces, they need to understand that you may be struggling right now. You're getting help, you're reading the book, you're working on improving, just like you'd go to rehab if you had to after the cast came off, right? Or if you had surgery, you might have to go and do exercises, every day. So we're really encouraging people to see it in the same way, to take the pressure off themselves and help other people understand what they're going through as well.
Cindy, one of the things that you said that I think I want to make sure that everybody caught, because you also mentioned how they look at themselves. Because a lot of this is now that you're talking about is focusing on how other people are treating them and how dealing with the stigma. One of the big issues is, like you said, how are people looking at themselves? And the reason that I love the broken leg analogy is because if I'm talking to a young person, and they say, well, the reason that happens is because I am autistic or I am whatever psychological things that they're going through. And I would ask them, and I'd say, well, if you had a broken leg, would you say I am a broken leg? You wouldn't say I'm a broken leg.
Right, that's right.
You would say I have a broken leg. So you can say, I have, or I've been diagnosed with autism. It's a part of you, but it isn't who you are. It doesn't define you. And that's why I love the fact that you're touching on that. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's the way I try to talk about it too. It's something I am experiencing. And also the important thing is to know that other people may be experiencing it as well. And so if you talk to them, if you open up, oftentimes others will say, I've struggled with my mood as well. I have experienced feeling down or, lonely or not connected to people, or I think that I don't know what to say when I'm with other people. So unless you're prepared to try to open up and say what's going on for you and really being honest, right? Then I think I think that's the same thing with the example you used earlier. How do you know all of those other, rich kids who the mom's working for aren't struggling as well or aren't covering up something in their life? Maybe their parents aren't spending a lot of time with them because they're at work, right? But to be open and honest and to be able to say, I'm feeling low, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm having a difficult time with my parents, or, my sister and I are fighting all the time. We all experience this. And the more of us that share it and talk about things honestly, I believe the better, things will be.
But wouldn't you say, Cindy, that, we live, it's 2019. I still have to get used to saying that. It's 2019. Right. And we live in this fast-paced world where social media is part of our lives. Thank God it is, because of the technology that we do have. But what I mean to say by this is, it's like a sort of facade that we have. Sure. Mm-hmm. And everyone is out to get that perfect picture on Instagram. And I'm just saying Instagram, and it could be any other platform. I'm not putting one platform down. It's not about that. And so don't we feel that being truthful, when you said be truthful and honest, my answer to you would be, if we weren't on a radio show, I would have said to you, Cindy, I feel that most people start to talk. That's my experience. And I don't know about Alan, because we're both in that profession where people come to us with their problems. But then, the moment they get to that vulnerability, the best way to describe it is there's a little lump in your throat and they feel it, you feel it, and then they shrug it away with a laughter or a joke about themselves. Right. And then you don't to that emotion.
I think you're 100% right. I think, number one, it is challenging in the sense that we're trying to portray a specific image. But what I would say as well is, of course, you're going to have that lump in your throat. And, of course, you're going to feel a little bit anxious about opening up and talking with someone. But what I would say to the individual, too, is how is not talking working for you? So, if it's not working for you the way you've been doing it up till now, or just presenting that specific image, well, what about giving it a try? What about seeing what happens if you do? Of course, we're going to be vulnerable. That's the only way sometimes. Mm-hmm. If you do open yourself up, you get the benefit of a constructive, meaningful connection to someone else, and it's not just superficial. So helping people understand that having a really open and getting through that little, those feelings of fear, anxiety, you can go back to closing up if you want, right? But it's just like riding a bike. When you get on that bike, of course you're nervous. Am I going to fall? Am I going to skin my knee? Am I going to be able to do it? But once somebody lets go and actually keeps trying and keeps going, even if it was scary, what's the feeling you have when you've been able to kind of fly on that bicycle by yourself, right? So I encourage people to say, sure, keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing, and you're going to continue to feel lousy. But if you want to try something new, give it a shot. Say something to someone. See what kind of and then I'll go through people with them and say, what's the best possible response you might get if you say that? What's the worst possible response from another person? And what's the most realistic? So we really help people, because most of the time, and I'll say to them, what if your friend wanted to talk to you? What if your friend was struggling and having a difficult time? Would you want them to tell you and open up and be honest? Or would you want them to shrug it off and just have a laugh, right? And be afraid to say to you how they're feeling or what they're going through. So I do understand what you're saying, and I think we really encourage people. And in the book is we give people specific lines to use. Well, we don't really throw everybody out there and say, just do it. We give them lots of conversation starters, right? Okay. What am I going to say if I want to tell my friend that I'm having a problem? What am I going to say if I'm feeling lonely? What am I going to say if I'm dealing with, a loss of a loved one or bereavement, right? So we do give people practical things they can say to help them get over that hurdle.
Fantastic. I wanted to know that. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, and Cindy, that's one of the things, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it's one of the things that I loved about the book, is that sometimes books will be written in a way in which they're educational, but it's almost as if you're attending a lecture, and they're just they keep throwing new things at you, and that's fine. But what I like is that yours essentially says, stop, think about this, try this. How about this line for you? This might work for this person, but maybe this one's better for you, and stuff. And so, but I had that great feeling of, wow, this is, it's, I'm reading a book, but yet it feels more interactive, and I really appreciated that. And in fact, one of the analogies that you used that in the book that you talked about, working through your feelings is like sorting through the stuff that you've stored in a messy basement. And that,
right.
Well, but see, that rang home to me, because I could then kind of visualize it. I have a room in the house that is kind of the place where everything goes. So I just had people over for the weekend, and it was like, okay, we've got a few things that are out that shouldn't. Okay, just kind of stuff it back over in that room that we're really not dealing with right now. And so it made me think of it and made me smile. That it's a great analogy for kind of what we're doing in our mind. But share a little bit more with the audience, that analogy and how that works.
Yeah. And I appreciate what you said about the book, because I really don't like lectures. You know what? It's like, I hope that you felt as well that I tried very hard to share my own experiences, that I'm not different than everybody else, right? And it doesn't matter, if I'm a psychologist or not. I struggle with the, death of my mother many, many years ago, and I like to eat sometimes instead of dealing with my feelings, right? So I want people to know that they're not alone and they're not different, and that we all go through our ups and downs, right? So I think the basement is great, because a lot of people, we stuff things down often, and we say, oh, I don't care, or it doesn't bother me, when that's really not the truth, right? If we're really honest with ourselves, or we get really angry sometimes, and it's easier to get angry than it is to kind of say, maybe I'm also sad. Maybe I'm also disappointed, right? Mm-hmm. So we shove things down inside of us, right? And it's the same as, like you said, we dump stuff in our basement, right? We may have old pictures of people or painful memories that are there and are probably affecting how we interact with others and how we feel, but we don't deal with them, head on. So what we said in terms of the basement is you can sit there and look through it. Rather than being afraid of looking through it, you can look through what's there. You're going to have a mixed bag of feelings, right? And one of the things that IPT really stresses is you don't have to do it alone. That I know that when, if you have someone you say, you know what, I got a bunch of junk in my basement and I need a little bit of help sorting it out. Can you do that with me for an hour, right? I mean, hopefully you have friends who will come for an hour, right? Mm-hmm. Or, when I remember a dear friend of mine, her husband died, and he was a very idiosyncratic kind of guy and a terrific guy in his own way. And I sat there with her going through some of his things. And you know what? It was much easier for her. We talk about it, or we laugh a little bit about it years later, about the things that I said, can I please take this package of clothespins? And I don't even know if people know what clothespins are anymore. Hang up their laundry outside. Can I take it home because it reminds me of him? It makes me feel I remember him, and I remember the kind of guy he was, right? So the basement is really what we shovel down in our minds and in our bodies and everywhere. And it's okay to sit and pay attention to it. And it's okay if you feel sad. You're not going to feel sad forever. I mean, I've had young people who come in and I'll say, if I start talking about my mom who passed away, I'm going to start crying and I won't stop. And I've said to that young woman, you know what? You may feel that way, but that's never happened in the last 20 years, okay? So it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel sad. We feel that way. Those are normal emotions. And I feel don't you think it's a lot better to deal with them than to pretend that they're not there?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Of course. It is much better. But again, it depends who's listening. Sometimes we're scared of not just of us telling the story, but of who's the reaction of the person that's across from us, right?
Yep.
And I think you have to find people. What we want to help people do is find the person who you feel is going to be able to be there for you. And hopefully, and either you do have somebody. That's why we do what we call the interpersonal inventory. So you draw your circle, your social circle, and at the beginning of the IPT process, you look at the people in your life. And if there are some people you want to enrich that relationship because they're, you've gotten to know them a little bit, they seem kind and caring and supportive, you may want to build on that. So you have that kind of response. If you have someone who really doesn't show that kind of care or concern for you or anyone else, then that isn't going to be the person you're really going to kind of move towards, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't have anyone in your life who you feel connected to, then we're going to help you find someone, right? So it may be a professional initially, but then in between your sessions, we're going to come up with ideas as to who else could you possibly connect with and build some connection so that you can get that care and concern. But I also want to help want people to know, are you doing that for others, right? So it's not just that you're expecting others to be there for you, but are you reaching out? Are you, like you said, I think you guys started with the idea of doing something kind, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When you do something kind for somebody else, no matter what the outcome is, whether they're nice to you or do something kind for you, you often feel better, right? So in IPT, we encourage people to not just focus on what the other person is going to say or do, but how did it make you feel to speak constructively, to open up, to tell somebody, please don't, say that to me. It hurts my feelings. Or, I don't want to spend as much time as you want to spend with me. So I think it's very important to be able to pay attention to what you're doing, even if the other person doesn't respond in the way you would hope they would have. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I got from reading that part of the book, and I'm very visual, so I'll visualize things as I'm reading it. And what I visualized was multiple circles as they grew outward, and then and different people at different parts. So I visualize it as, it isn't that you need to, you think somebody's, been a bad influence on you. It's not like you need to just throw them out of the equation, but maybe they need to be a little further out in one of those other circles, and somebody else who's further out in that circle needs to be brought in closer. And that's how I visualize it in reading your book. So hopefully I was grasping it the way that you were presenting it. We're going to take a break right now.
Yeah, and it doesn't
Go ahead.
It doesn't have to be. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think it doesn't have to be the right way or the wrong way. It's more your circle, and you need to figure out how you want to make it work for you, right?
Yep.
So you're 100% right. By even sitting down and drawing your circle, those concentric circles that move out, you get a chance to look at it, right? You get a chance to become more aware. Gee, I didn't remember that person was somebody I used to really enjoy, spending time with. And I'm not sure why we haven't seen each other as frequently as we did. Maybe I can reach out to that person. So I think you really absolutely got it. And it can be whatever way you want. You're right. You're not going to dump everybody in your circle. Just the other thing that's important too is that, having reasonable expectations is important, and finding people who have similar expectations as you do as well. That's going to work better, right, for building those relationships. So you can't expect that one person is going to meet your needs in the way you want them met, at every time you want them met, in exactly the way you want it done, right? That's not terribly realistic. Not one person doesn't embody that. So if you have some friends that maybe you connect with and you have a great time, but you're not going to necessarily count on them for a deep, meaningful conversation, doesn't mean you can't still go out and have a great time with them.
Sure.
But if there's other people who you feel are better at being more understanding or are there for you in some way or understand some of your issues, then those are the people you're going to go to or keep those relationships, going, and you're going to, give to them and they'll give to you. So, yeah, I do think the circle is a very important beginning part of the interpersonal psychotherapy process.
One of the things I want to do, time is just flying by, but I want to make sure that we get in a question that has come in from one of our listeners. And again, we thank you for taking the time to do this. I know that we get quite a few that come from teachers that will also make comments and say, it's great that I can send this in ahead of time so that you can ask it, because your show is while I'm in class, and I get yours through iTunes, so I go ahead and listen in the evening hoping to get the answer. So, but this particular question says, the drugs being handed out to young women who are dealing with depression is outrageous. As a school counselor, I am prohibited from speaking out about this to their parents directly. What I can do is recommend reading material for them. I purchased your book this week, and so I look forward to receiving it. During the show, can you speak to this specific area of youth? Thank you, and this is Veronica in San Francisco. Cindy, are you with us?
Yes. Did you want me to kind of comment on the letter, the question? I certainly understand what the teacher or the guidance counselor is saying. I agree that I don't think we need to comment on the issue of the drugs per se, because I think some people may be helped by it. But I think what you can certainly do, there's no reason that you cannot ask about other areas and problems and issues. And I offer ideas and suggestions. So what I will do is, even if someone has taken some medication, or even if some of the symptoms have changed, let's say concentration or sleep problems or appetite or other things, you're still left oftentimes with problems and issues in the relationship that are also contributing to the depression. So I wouldn't really even address the medication issue. I would ask, what else is going on? Are you having difficulties, a conflict with someone, right? Are you in the middle of a transition where you're going from a high school to a college program, or you're moving, or your parents are separating, or someone in your family's lost a job? Are you lonely or isolated, even if you're with people? Have you someone who you love has died, and it may be a long time ago, and you're still feeling as sad as you felt, the day it happened? So I would just address that. I would just inquire. I would just ask, what other issues are you struggling with? What was the most stressful thing that happened this past week in your interactions with other people? And then I would, as the person sounded like she was going to do, recommend interpersonal psychotherapy, recommend the book, recommend, people connecting with a trained IPT therapist. And that's how I would handle that. I really think that you don't have to, no matter what your opinion and no matter what your belief system is, you can still address the other concerns that most people have who are depressed. Does that kind of make sense? Do you guys have any other thoughts or ideas for that questioner?
No, I loved your answer, especially about not addressing specifically the drugs, but to look at all the other aspects. I like the answer a lot.
Well, and I'll add to that too. We end up dealing with a lot of young people, and by the time we're dealing with them, they're on a cocktail of drugs now. And so I understand where this counselor is coming from. If they're seeing a child, if they've seen a child for the last couple of years, and they've seen them either become more lethargic or a lot of changes, I think they can address the drug issue only from the standpoint of asking, not trying to judge it, but asking, what drugs is she on, because I'm recognizing changes in her behavior. And one of the things I know it's becoming a huge problem is many of these drugs are also bringing with them weight gain. So now you're taking someone who is dealing with a particular issue, you're adding weight gain, and now that's now causing an additional problem, both from a health standpoint and a self-esteem standpoint. So I think asking questions about it, but just be real careful as far as the judging on it, because it's very possible that there is another physician or psychiatrist that's involved that may be prescribing it. And we're sort of putting our own judgment on it. I can say it on this show if I'm not talking to one specific person. Generally speaking, I think that we're incredibly over-medicated, and they probably don't need that entire cocktail. But at least to let the parents look at it to the point of saying, maybe we should get somebody else to check this out and reevaluate. Do they need to be on 7 different medications? Let's find out exactly what they need.
Absolutely. To ask, really, as you said, to inquire. That's always the best way to do it. You can inquire either with the parents, or you can inquire with the individual, the young person you're seeing too. How do you feel about it? Is there any change? Is there anything about it that concerns you? Have you asked the questions? And really help them know how to do it, right? So they may say, well, I don't know, but then I don't understand what the person is saying to me. When I ask my question, okay, well, what else could you say after that? Could you say, I really wasn't clear what you said. Could you explain it to me again, please? Or to say, well, my parents aren't going to listen to me. They think this is the right thing to do. Well, let's talk about how you can express your feelings to them in a way that they might be able to listen to you more effectively, right? Like, I'd love to have a conversation with someone and say, well, did you just tell them this is stupid and I don't want to do it? Or did you actually say, Mom, I'd like to have a conversation about my meds with you, right? Most of the time, the young person will laugh because they know they probably said it was by yelling at it or arguing about it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think being able to help people have a conversation and ask them, okay, tell me exactly what you said. I want to hear the exact words, because most oftentimes there can be a better way to communicate, right? So.
Absolutely. Hey, Cindy, I have the next question for you. In your book, you address 4 different problem areas in our lives that contribute to depression. Please tell us what they are.
Yeah. I think what we use is the 4 kind of focal areas are basically broad areas that most people experience which may contribute or trigger a depressive episode. And so the first area is conflicts or disputes. And it doesn't mean you have to be, yelling and arguing with someone on an ongoing basis. You could just kind of be at a place where you guys don't talk anymore, right? And that can be a conflict or a dispute. The other focal area is life transitions. And that can be either you're having a divorce or it doesn't have to be a bad thing. You can have a birth of a child. I think we all know that the adjustment to having children is huge. And some people do suffer from postpartum depression as well. You can have to move countries or move schools or, a parent or an individual has lost their job. So those are examples of life transitions. The other area is kind of what we call unresolved bereavement. So it's when you've lost or someone's died that you feel close to or was important in your life, and either you still feel as badly as you felt years ago when that happened, or you may not have let yourself feel sad about it, that you may have kind of felt numb and you didn't really cry or you didn't express your feelings of sadness, and that's contributing to your depression. And the last area is really feelings of loneliness and isolation. So those are 4 areas that we identify, that the individual identifies, and then we create a goal. We work on one area at a time because it is a short-term psychotherapy. So you're going to, let's say, work for 12 weeks. You're going to choose one of those areas that resonate with you, that are contributing to what your problems are. We're going to create a goal related to that area, one very specific, measurable, achievable goal, and we work on that for the 12 sessions. And then we basically know what you did that helped you achieve that goal, and then you can apply those techniques and strategies to the other issues that come up for you, because certainly lots of issues continuously come up. But it's helpful to focus on one thing and work towards accomplishing that so that you feel better. So that's really the 4 different problem areas that we identify early on in the process of IPT.
Well, Cindy, thank you for sharing that. And, I've got to tell you, this has been such an incredible show, but the time has flown by, and there is another question that is coming in, a listener question, but we only have about a minute left. But this one reads, my new son-in-law has become totally obsessed with one side of the aisle in regards to politics within the last year. And then it says, so my daughter, who has battled depression when she was younger, is starting to spiral into it again. She was on the phone in tears with me, saying that when her husband, gets home, he jumps on social media immediately when he's home and has repeatedly embarrassed and alienated her from many of their friends who dare to not take the side of that movement. She loves her husband deeply, and they have a small son, but I'm at a total loss about how to help her or even him, and I was wondering if your book would be useful for her in this situation. And this is from Betty in Alabama.
Yeah, I think it would be great. And I also think I just wanted to add, too, to what you had said a bit earlier in terms of finding us. the easiest way is to look us up also, feelingbetterthebook.com. That's a lot easier than trying to find interpersonal psychotherapy. But for this particular woman, absolutely, there are lots of ways she can talk to her daughter and her son-in-law, possibly, once she has spoken to the daughter, and the daughter can find ways to approach her husband and to be able to say, you know what, I really want to talk with you about your interest in social media, in terms of politics. When you come home, I'd like to be able to sit down and talk and have a conversation with you, and it's upsetting to me when you first turn to the social media. So they can certainly address, there's lots of specific ideas in the book and specific ways she can approach the husband, because the important part is, what do they expect of each other, right? Have they sat down and identified their expectations of each other in terms of communicating and in terms of caring about each other's opinions? She may need to also spend time asking him, what is it that intrigues you about this? What is it that's important to you? Is it important, that we talk, when you go and you talk about it with some of our friends who don't agree with you? Why do you like doing that? So there's a huge component of understanding each person's feelings and what they're getting out of the situation and how they can work together to come to some mutual solution that's going to work better for them. So that's a good starting place for that couple.
Cindy, thank you so much.
And for the mother.
Yes. Cindy, thank you so much. And unfortunately, as I said, we've run out of time. I would love to have you back. I think we could do a whole nother hour. This would be great.
I would love to speak with you again. It would be delightful to answer people's questions. And thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And Garbriella, thank you so much. And for everybody out there. So Garbriella, when it fits in her schedule, is going to try to be with us every week. And we're going to start out with, where in the world is Garbriella?
We will do that. Thank you so much, Cindy. I really enjoyed learning more.
It's a pleasure, and thank you very much. And I'm happy to talk to you at any time, wherever you are. I'm in Florida right now. I'll be back in the cold on Thursday. So
Okay. I was just just hit me with a little pang, the heat there when you said Florida.
Yeah.
I know. Come to Toronto, guys, and visit us there.
Okay. I might just do that.
That's right. All right. Well, for everybody out there.
We have truck drivers there.
All right. Well, for everybody out there, please be sure and put us on your calendar and tune in next week when we'll be joined by Dr. Elson Haas to discuss his new book, Staying Healthy with New Medicine. And to let you know, I've not only read the book, but I have been to a retreat with him. He's phenomenal. You're going to love him. And please visit our archives of past interviews at answersforthefamily.com, or you can subscribe through iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and probably many other ways. If you like what you hear, please leave a review. It will help us to reach more people, and we greatly appreciate it. Next time you're on Facebook or Twitter, please remember to stop by our page, check out some of our latest posts. If you like them, please like us and spread the word. And also, as I said, if you can go to the Indiegogo page and check out Dare to Be Kind in the search bar, you will find more information on that movement. It is one of the most important movements we can have out there. So for everybody out there, be good human beings, be kind, and be with us next week on Answers for the Family.
You're listening to Answers for the Family with Alan Cardoza, right here on LA Talk Radio.